Good morning. So this morning I have the privilege to get to share with you the things that I did on the Latvia mission trip. So I get to share with you what we did with the missionary kids for Bible camp, some of the time that I spent with the Bobbies, and all the different sites that I saw in Old Town Riga, and then also nearby in Jurmala. That's where the missionary conference was, where we served the missionary kids. So there were 8 people that went on this trip along with myself. There was 2 from North Carolina, a recently retired pastor and his wife. There was 1 lay member from Chicago, and then 3 from South Sioux City, Nebraska, a pastor, his daughter, and then another member in his congregation. So 8 total, all from across the U.S., and we all met for the first time together in Latvia. We had used the power of the internet to do a couple Zoom calls to prep for our mission trip, and we met online in that way in the months preceding, but in person, that was the first time when we were over there in Latvia all together. So here is a picture of the volunteers, our team, and then also all of the missionary children that we served. So the Bible camp that we did was adapted and a little different than the usual structure for one of these. So what usually happens is you do an English Bible camp, anywhere in Eurasia, in Europe, and it's sponsored by a church, and then they invite children in the community to come to this camp, and it's kind of an evangelism opportunity where many of these children, they may be involved in the church, they might not, but their parents may think that, oh, well, here's this opportunity for them to learn a bit of English, send them to the camp, and then what they get to do is also witness to them and teach them about Jesus. But our setting was a little bit different since we were ministering to the children of missionaries. So what happened here is there's a missionary conference for the region of Eurasia every year. That's annual. And what we did is while their parents were listening to the keynote speaker of the conference, Dr. Joel Bierman, he's a professor at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis. While they were listening to the speaker, we had their kids, and were taking care of them so that they could be relaxed and have all their attention and energy focused on listening and being rejuvenated. The topic was actually the Sabbath, which was very, very fitting for our retreat. And from all the feedback that we got from the parents, they really appreciated us being there and able to take their kids off their hands for a little bit. So being that these were missionary kids and they all knew and spoke English, we adapted the curriculum a bit. So there's the portion of the curriculum where you learn English. We just took that part out because it wasn't needed. But what we did do is we had openings and closings, just like any other Bible camp. You had the Bible lesson for each day, music, games, and crafts as well. And the theme for our week was Jesus Frees Us. That was the main focus, and there was different Bible stories that we had throughout the week that focused on this theme of Jesus Frees Us. We looked at Jesus frees us to forgive, with Joseph forgiving his brothers. Jesus frees us to trust, with Daniel in the lion's den. And then finally, Jesus frees us to live. And we looked at the story of Elijah and the widow's son who had died and then was raised back to life. So that Jesus Frees Us curriculum, that's what we did with all the younger kids. And then I had a group of the older kids. Two of these you'll recognize. With the older kids, I adapted what we did at Camp Minneboji this past summer on the way, the truth, and the life. And I adapted that curriculum, fit it into a shorter time period, took some things out, added some things in, and that's what I did with the older kids. I got them all to myself. And we watched the movie WALL-E. If you were here this past summer and remember me talking about what we did at Camp Minneboji, we watched the movie WALL-E, and we saw how this movie and really all good stories point to Jesus, point to the gospel in some way. And really simply, just even in the common storytelling technique of, there's a good guy and there's a bad guy. Why does that resonate with us? Why is that such a common theme? Well, it's because we see it in the Bible. There's Christ who defeats sin, death, and the devil. This shows up in all of the stories that we read, that we watch, that we hear and listen to, because it's a biblical theme. Because this is one of the big themes of the Bible, that Jesus is our hero, our protagonist, and that he defeats evil. All right? And all the stories that we make, that we write, we don't make them out of nothing. Only God can make something out of nothing. Just as if you want to build a chair, okay, you need wood. You need glue, all right? Where did you get that wood? Did you create that wood yourself? No, you got it from a tree. Okay, where did the tree come from? Okay, eventually, once you get it down to its most basic components, we're only using things that God has made in his creation. And we're sculpting them into new inventions. And because of that, when you look at a chair that's made out of wood, you can see the mark of the Creator on that chair. Okay, and the same exact thing is true of the stories that we make. Nobody can make a story out of nothing. It's going to be made of these building blocks that God has created. And because of that, every story, secular or Christian, whether the author or director is a Christian or not, these stories that we see are going to have the mark of the Creator on them. So that's what we did with WALL-E. We saw how there's many different Christ figures in the movie, different messiahs and heroes. We see good versus evil, and a lot of biblical imagery as well. There's references to Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, the new heavens and the new earth is just ripe with all of these biblical connections that you can make. So that's what I did with the older kids, and we had a lot of fun doing that. Oops. Something that's really fun working with missionary kids is that they're really smart because obviously their parents are missionaries or pastors, so they know their doctrine really well. So I even the stuff that I taught them, it was a lot less teaching and a lot more just applying things that they had already learned previously and already known. So really, really smart group of kids. So here is Pastor Awe. He's was blessing us with telling the Bible story each day, and he was a great storyteller. Even for me, it was really fun to watch him recap and summarize the story each day. He really captivated the kids. He's incredible at doing that. And so Pastor Ah, he's the one from South Sioux City, Nebraska. This guy is a pro at doing these short-term mission trips. I got to talking to him one day and asked him, so how many of these have you done before? And I asked that because the previous week, himself and the two others from his church, they were in Poland. So they did 2 of these trips back to back. And they're actually also didn't have a lot of previous time to make this decision too. It was kind of a last minute call. They asked him, like, you're going to be in Poland, would you be willing to extend your trip another week? Because we really needed more team members on the Latvia trip. And praise be to God by His grace. He said, yeah, well, we're up for it. We can do it. We'll do it. So he did 2 back to back in 2 weeks. So I asked him, okay, how many of these have you done before? And he's like, well, more than I can count, more than I can remember. He has done so many of these throughout his ministry as a pastor, which is pretty incredible. Really cool to get his perspective on all the things that he's done. Here's a picture of us. One evening, we took the children off the parents' hands so that they had some time to relax in the evening. In the hotel that we were staying at, it had a spa there connected, so I think a lot of the mothers took that opportunity to go relax at the spa. Saw a lot of people walking around in robes during that time, so I think they enjoyed that. And here's all of the missionaries in Eurasia and their children, and then also myself and my team members for that week. So this is all of our LCMS missionaries that are serving in Eurasia. Pretty big group. And it was such a blessing to meet all of the missionaries as well. We had plenty of opportunities for fellowship, and we were included in the conference meals and such. And meeting the missionaries, I think for me, was just as much a blessing as serving their children that week. Just getting a perspective on what international ministry is all about, learning things that I hadn't known before, and just, we know about and talk about the things that we're doing overseas, but then actually meeting those people, face to face and talking with them and getting their perspectives and their experiences on day-to-day life was just made it a lot more real. It was just really interesting. So this was Jurmala. This is where the conference was at for the missionaries and where our hotel was at. And Jurmala is right on the Baltic Sea. So this is the beach on the Baltic Sea during the daytime. Really interesting cultural differences over there. They have no qualms or no inhibitions about showing a lot of skin over there, and they don't feel the need to be in shape to do that either. So you see all sorts of things. Just interesting cultural tidbit there. Yeah, it's a distant photo for a reason, Don't want to look too close. And this is the beach at night in the evening. We had a meal along the sea at a restaurant there, and just the sunset was really incredible. And this was late. This was like 9, 10 p.m. at night. So it stays light out really long into the evening, just because of how far north you are in Latvia. So we were in Jurmala previously, and now we're in Riga. We're in Old Town Riga. This is St. Peter's Lutheran Church. It's the tallest church in Riga, has the highest steeple, and it's really prominent in the city's skyline. So you can kind of get just a little bit of the perspective of, this is from in front of it from the bottom, just how high up that really goes. And then this is inside of St. Peter's. Just a beautiful, beautiful church. It's just really incredible, the architecture and the history there. Then next up is a bit closer of, gets you a better view of the altarpiece. Just this magnificent altarpiece, all made out of wood. Even the back side of it as well. I don't have a picture of it, but the back was almost just as beautiful as the front. It's incredible. You know, they didn't skimp out on anything. They didn't leave anything to so. Just every last bit. Everything was incredibly beautiful. Now, the cool thing with St. Peter's is that you had the opportunity to go up the steeple. You had to pay a fee, of course. But this is from not the very top of the steeple, but about halfway. That's as high as you can go for the tourists. But this is the top of St. Peter's Church. And then back here, this is St. John's Lutheran Church. I'll have some more pictures of St. John's. St. John's is the oldest church in Riga. And, yeah, Diane. Yeah, I'd probably just have to Google it myself. I do know that St. Peter's is younger or newer than St. John's is. St. John's is the oldest. And it's funny, too, there's two Lutheran churches here right next to each other. And they're both huge, and I'm sure a lot of money went into both of them, but they're right next to each other. And I asked Dr. Rajak, one of the director for Eurasia, I asked him, he was kind of giving us a short tour, why is this? Why two huge Lutheran churches right next to each other? And he said, well, good question, I don't know. So I didn't find out. Maybe I will someday. My guess from just what I learned is that since this is the older one and it's a bit smaller, and this one came later, perhaps they wanted a bigger church, and they wanted to make something that was even larger and grander in size. But I'm glad they left the old one, but why they didn't tear the old one down or they built right next to it, I can't tell you. I'm not sure.
Did you already say what the congregation, what the numbers are?
I didn't. Good question. Let's see here. St. Peter's was built in 1209, so just a couple years ago, and it was rebuilt in 1470. Okay, so that's one of the other interesting things with these sorts of churches is, there's been a lot of renovations and where it may have even burned down and was rebuilt. There's many. It's kind of like what's that? Oh, it's the ship of Theseus. Anybody heard of that? This Greek kind of riddle. If a ship gets repaired so many times so that none of the original parts remain, is it still the same ship? It's kind of a similar thing with these churches. They've been founded in 1209, but so many things have been rebuilt or re-added or replaced over the years. That sure, it's the same church, but it's not original every single piece. There's been a lot of work done on them as well. So Sandra, in St. Peter's, if I understood correctly, they don't have a congregation there at St. Peter's. At least it didn't seem like that. With St. Peter's, it was more of a tourist site. There was a lot of concerts there throughout the week, and while I was there was even a concert going on. But it's actually at St. John's. That's where weekly services are, and they still have pastors at St. John, and they have that's where the Latvian services are at, and then also the service in in English is there twice a month as well. So I don't think they have a congregation at St. Peter's anymore, and it's just they have the services there at St. John's. And when I went to the Latvian service at St. John's, it's hard to gauge on how many people there were exactly, because it's such a large church, and we were pretty scattered and dispersed throughout the church. But if it was smaller, it probably seemed like there were more people, just because of the size of it. But I'd say there's probably around 50 to 100. Around 50 people that morning, and that was just one Sunday morning, so I couldn't tell you what it is commonly, but that was my experience. Yeah, good question. So that's what makes Latvia really interesting when you compare it to other European cities. So usually you look at a city in Europe, you look at the skyline, you see all the churches and the steeples, and let's say you have 4 or 5 churches. Usually you have 4 Catholic churches and 1 Lutheran church. Okay, but in Latvia, it's flipped. It's vice versa. You have 4 Lutheran churches and one Catholic. So Latvia has always been historically Lutheran. From very early on, almost right at the beginning of the Reformation, Latvia was a Lutheran state. So just really interesting. The national religion of Latvia is Lutheranism, and that the majority of people, majority of Latvians, they identify as Lutheran. But so that's the cool thing. The kind of sad thing is just like much of Europe, you have a lot of people there that identify as Christians or go along with whatever the state church is. The majority of people in Latvia, they identify as Lutheran, but very few actually attend worship or attend a church there. So it's just the Latvian Lutheran Church, and the LCMS is in fellowship with them, pulpit and altar fellowship. So when I was there and attended the Latvian service, I got the opportunity to partake in communion with them, which was a really cool experience. But so just the Latvian Lutheran Church. There aren't any other synods, or there's not the ELCA or WELS or anything. Just the Latvian Lutheran Church. Yeah. Yeah, so get him to go to church, would be one, obviously, or they identify as Lutheran, but for all intents and purposes, many of them, they're not really even Christian at all. It's just a cultural sort of identification. And then for as far as Pastor Bobby goes, as a professor at the seminary there, a big push for what they're going to do is to train and raise up, future pastors. And that's not only the cool thing with Riga is, training future pastors isn't just relegated to Riga. It's such kind of a hub of transportation that people from all around are coming to the seminary there. In fact, when I was there for service at St. John's, I met a young man from Poland who was there visiting, and he was either was a student at the Luther Academy there or was interested in being one. And then I know the online classes with the Luther Academy, they have people from all over, from Pakistan and India and places in the Middle East. So it's really just a mission field for much larger than just the region of Latvia. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, just the history, how part of the reason that made it so today that people identify but don't really practice is that throughout Latvia's history, Lutheranism was commonly a religion of the elites, the ruling class. That's kind of what happened at the Reformation, that the rulers of Latvia, they were converted to Lutheranism, and then they decided, well, I'm ruling, I believe this is the truth. Everybody under my rule, you're Lutheran now, or else. This is just the way it's going to be. So throughout Latvian history, we're Lutheran, but there wasn't really that deep connection or kind of that buy-in. I'm Lutheran because my king's Lutheran, not because this is something that I chose or this is something that I necessarily believe is 100% true. So there's kind of that disconnect, and then it makes things even more kind of complicated and interesting with Latvia being under Soviet rule as well, with the USSR. Interestingly enough, during the Industrial Revolution, the three biggest and most important cities that had the most output at that time would have been Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Riga. Riga was part of the big three in the amount of production they did, and being along the Baltic Sea is a very important trading route. So yeah, under Soviet rule, then the Latvian people, Christianity is kind of discouraged. You learn to keep to yourself. You don't want to stand out or do anything that would get the attention of the KGB. And even that life under Soviet rule, still has an effect on the people and their culture today. Kind of reserved, kind of keep to yourself. Friendly when you walk throughout the city, but they're not gonna go out of their way to say hello or smile or greet you. Kind of the common facial expression is just kind of serious. Don't smile, just keep to yourself and do your own thing. Now that being said, this is also really interesting. So all of that is true, and the effect of Soviet rule and the effects that it still has on them today. But that doesn't mean that they're not open to evangelism. And this is how I know that. I saw a Jehovah's Witness building there. I saw Mormons, Church Latter-day Saints. They had a building there as well, and I saw Mormon missionaries walking around. And I also saw people in the Hare Krishnas movement, kind of the New Age thing. They had their their tambourines and like a loudspeaker, and they were walking down the sidewalk kind of singing their song and handing out pamphlets. And also, I was walking in the park one day with August and Benjamin, and there was a gentleman that approached us. He handed out a pamphlet to us. It was in Russian. I don't read Russian, so I just said thanks, and I said thank you in Latvian, which is Paldies, and I guess he assumed that maybe I speak Latvian then, because then he's like, oh, and then he got a different pamphlet, handed that to me, and that was in Latvian, and still, I don't read Latvian either, so I just said thank you and went our way. Got back to their house, and then we had the opportunity to get our Google Lens out, which is an incredible tool where you just use your camera on your phone and it'll translate for you. And we were taking a look at this pamphlet, and it was actually a gospel tract. It was kind of talking about creation and how there must be a creator because of the universe and the world that we see around us. And it was this gospel tract, this Christian ministry that was based out of Germany. So all that to say, these groups wouldn't be there in Riga if it wasn't working, or if the people weren't at least open to what they were sharing and what they had to say. They wouldn't be there if the people were completely shut off and not open to any of these evangelistic organizations. So I think that was really encouraging to see. Unfortunately, these different groups, Jehovah's Witness, Mormons, Hare Christians, they're not preaching the gospel. So I think that's also a reason for Lutherans to step up and be doing similar things and kind of filling that void. I was already half joking with Pastor Bobby that you got to start doing Jesus door to door over in Latvia. So we'll see if that takes off. But really interesting culture and mission field over there. This is me from the top of St. Peter's steeple. You can see a ton of the city. As you can see, really cool views from every side. And then here's me and Gus from the other side. I think I have a picture where you can see the Delgava River. Yeah, this would be here. Ben as well. Here's the Delgava River in the back, which flows into the Baltic Sea. And then way in the back here, I was really curious what this structure was. It kind of looked like a more like concrete version of the Eiffel Tower. It's really tall. But it's actually just a radio tower. I figured you could probably send radio waves across all of Europe with that thing, but really interesting, just a huge structure. So here one night, this was along with the missionary conference. We went to this restaurant in Riga. That was a medieval restaurant. I don't know how old the restaurant had been in business, but I know that where it was in this underground monastery, this underground monastery is 750 years old. So this structure that we ate in underground is 750 years old. Pretty incredible. But at the restaurant there, their whole kind of their shtick was they served medieval food with these old recipes that they hadn't changed or added anything to. It's completely authentic. So we had these interesting salads that had like nuts and dates in them, and even beef and chicken in the salad itself. And there's so many courses to the meal. There's 3 salads that they served. Then they served this kind of quiche like pastry that had spinach in it. Then we had rabbit. They served rabbit as well, which was interesting. And then also pork, where it was on this kind of spit that they, a small spit that they put on the table, and you kind of carved it off for yourself. And for dessert, it was a plum pie, which was interesting as well. But yeah, just really incredible experience, and it was all lit by candlelight. So it was kind of dark down there. I wasn't able to get a ton of good pictures because it was just by candlelight and it was all murky. But yeah, just very, very cool. And they also had a well in the restaurant, which would have been there 750 years ago, which is really important for the monastery and the monks. Is if they were ever under siege, is basically just their own little fortress, because if you have fresh water, then you're good to go for a long time, as long as you have enough food down there. But yeah, there's a well, which was interesting. And this is outside of the restaurant. All these people down here are the missionaries and their families. And this is just the evening that night. These kind of streets and alleyways and just the buildings on each side was pretty common sight in Old Town. Okay, so now we're over at St. John's, which is the oldest church, like I said, and this is where the services are weekly. This is me at the front door of the church. Really, really big doors. Felt like I could nail 95 theses to it, but that'd be wrong church, wrong country. So this is the one picture that actually two. There's two pictures that I snuck during the Latvian service. I wanted to be respectful, but I figured I can't pass this up. So this is kind of the people during the service. The two pastors are way up there, way up front. So it's a really, really long hall. And the chancel area, I do have another picture of that because the English-speaking service was just in the chancel area up here. That's how big this chancel is, and they put chairs up there for us to sit at. And here's a picture of the hymnal. The tune sounded familiar, but I tried to kind of follow along with the words. I wasn't quite confident enough to try to just pronounce them and sing them myself, because I didn't really know all the pronunciations for Latvian. But that's what the language looks like. At least it's not in Cyrillic, which is a totally different alphabet like Russian is. So it's still the same alphabet that we use. So I hope maybe that'll help Pastor Bobby as he's learning the language. Maybe. We'll see. But very, very interesting language. It does sound similar to Russian when people speak it. Not totally. It's a little bit different, but it does have some similar pronunciation sounds. Yeah, all I learned is thank you. Thank you is Paul Diaz. Paul Diaz. In my head, it sounds like a full name, Paul Diaz. So that's how I remembered it. But it's Paul Diaz, and it's not with the Z, it's with the S at the end. Yeah, so for the international aspect, all of those classes are in English. So it's strictly in English So when Pastor Bobby teaches, he'll always be teaching in English. So that's kind of the common language that everybody's expected to know in order to take those classes. And those kind of that international group at this time, those are still all online over Zoom or whatever video call it may be. I know that there's plans to be in person for that kind of international group, but that kind of got stymied once COVID happened. They were working towards that to be in person. Then COVID happened, and all their plans were really just set back to ground zero, which was unfortunate. But that's still a hope and goal for the future. But yeah, English would be the common language. Going back one picture, one thing that was really cool about the Latvian service is the way that they practiced communion. So it was interesting. It's kind of a mix of both. It was more formal than how we do it, but it was also less formal, more informal in a way. So other than the greeters that were at the front, there's a greeter that kind of let us in, gave us a hymnal, gave us the bulletin, said hi to us. That was also interesting. That day, Gus and I attended service, and there was a tourist group that was kind of in the alleyway in front of the front door, and it just had worked out that a couple of these tourists had gone into the church, and we were behind him. And I guess this is a pretty common thing that St. John's has to deal with, that all these tourists will come in while they're trying to worship and have service. And unfortunately, the tourists aren't they're not very respectful all the time. So we were going in, these tourists were in front of us, and they're saying, they're like, worship, like leave, and then we kind of got caught within it, and we're like, no, like we want to come to the service, and like, oh, they're like, oh, sorry, like, so we almost got kicked out, but it all worked out, and then one of the greeters there, this gentleman, he spoke English, and we kind of quickly figured out that we're Americans, and funny enough, he went to high school in Illinois, in Rockford, Illinois, on some exchange program. And we were telling him where we were at. We're from South Dakota, and he's like, "Oh, is that in the South?" And we're like, "No, not in the South by a little bit." So yeah, just interesting connection there. And we were talking to him in English for a little bit, which was just really cool. So anyway, back to how they did communion. So there were no ushers. Once it was time for communion, we all got up at once from the pews in the biggest part of the church, and then we all went up to the chancel together. And like I said, this chancel is really big, so there's enough room for everybody to stand there. And then there was no one guiding or ushering us. Everybody just kind of took their turn. Whoever gets to the rail first, that's your spot. You get to go first. So I guess if you're faster than somebody else, you get the first table, basically. So while the first table went and everybody was at the rail, the rest of us, we either stood or a lot of people knelt while we waited our turn at the rail. So there was just 2 tables. That was how many people are there. So I was in the second group. I knelt. A lot of kneeling throughout the service as well, which was interesting. And they don't even have the kneeling rails in the pews that you'll find in Catholic churches a lot. So they knelt, and they knelt right on the floor. That's all the option they had. So I would feel like I'd have to build some calluses up on my knees to do that regularly. But anyway, so Then we got to the rail. We knelt there, and everyone receives the bread directly to the mouth. No one received it by hand. That was what the common thing that everybody did. Bread directly to mouth, and then it was only the common cup as well. Everybody used the common cup as we went through. And one other thing that was cool is that the pastor, he absolved everyone of their sins and blessed them before we communed. So when we knelt there, he went through and forgave everyone individually, and then we had communion. I assume just to reflect that we want to, go to God and approach God in a right heart and mind, in a worthy manner. But that was really, really cool as well. And then when we were done, you got up and you just walked back to the pew and directed yourself to do that. All right, so this is the front of St. John's, and this is that chancel area that I've been talking about. So we just set up some chairs there, and then this is during the English service. So that's Reverend Dr. Cundiff preaching for us. He's also one of the professors at Luther Academy. And this was the group of, there's one or two missionaries that were still around from the conference, but mostly this was just the missionaries that are at Riga, at Luther Academy, and their families that get together for this. And this is, I believe it's twice a month. It's like 2 Sundays a month that they have this offered. And so this is the altarpiece then in St. John's. Also just very, very beautiful. There is these 2 figures on the side, and I was talking with Pastor Bobby. We didn't figure this out, but we were kind of debating on who they were. You can't see it very well here, but this statue, he's holding keys, the keys of the church. So my guess is that it's probably Peter. Peter, on this rock, on the rock of Peter's faith, the church is built. So it's my guess it's probably Peter on the left. And then this statue, he's holding a sword. Pastor Rob and I, we both agree that, it's probably Peter. But this guy, not sure. The guy with the sword, not 100%. My idea was maybe it's St. Paul, because he also has a beard, and I've seen Paul depicted with a beard like that, and maybe the sword is like, the sword of the Spirit, the sword of God's Word, and Paul wrote a lot of the epistles, but I'm not sure. Pastor Bobby's guess was St. John, but I don't know. Well, that's up for debate.
That altar as old as the church?
Yeah, I don't know. It's something I have to look up. Yeah, not sure when the altar was built as opposed to the church. But I do know something I didn't mention is the church was originally founded by the Teutonic Knights. They were the first one to build it, and that was like in the 1100s, so way back. But they were that was the order that built and founded this church in the beginning. And this is myself and the Bobby family up in the front of the church. Simon he's still rocking his officer outfit, so old habits die hard. That one's not going away anytime soon. And here's a better vantage point of the whole altarpiece. I I I wish we had the chance to do this. They were taking a quick tour after the service, down into the basement of the church. One of the Latvian pastors was leading that, but we had to get going, so we didn't have the chance to join him on that because it was just taking too long, and we had other stuff to do. But I wish I was able to go down in the basement because I'm sure would have been some crazy history down there. Because when you go down into the foundations, that's where you get into like the oldest parts of the church. So I'm sure some really cool stuff was down there. Probably like some Teutonic knight was buried down there for how many hundreds of years. But yeah, it was very neat church. All right, so this is getting closer to the end. One of the things that I got to do with the Bobbies is we went on a little boat tour on the Delgava River. And so this is myself and Simon on the boat. We were on top of the deck, and it was just really neat to see the city from the river and just see the skyline. Here's Pax and Simon. They're really enjoying our time there. Simon had gotten it in his head that shortly after they moved to Latvia, Simon decided that they should have a boat. He wanted to buy a boat, and so that obviously that wasn't going to happen. So this was the second best thing. Simon, we can't buy a boat, but we can go on a boat tour. So this is kind of fulfilling that desire. No, we didn't go fishing. Although I did see people go fishing on the Delgava River. I don't know what you'd catch in there. And this is me and Pax. There's St. Peter's in the back. It's kind of a square here. This is the House of the Blackheads is what it's called. It's kind of a museum. There's some historical significance to the building, but I forget the details on it. But you can go inside, and there's a lot of exhibits on the history of Latvia. And then also in this square, they have a marker that marks the spot where they had the first Christmas tree in a town square ever. They were the first one to do it in Latvia, to do a big, town Christmas tree, which is pretty cool. I hadn't known that. I knew how Martin Luther had kind of started Christmas trees like in the home for personal use, but they were the first ones to do it in the market square, which is really cool. Yeah, they're very, very close together. The streets are pretty narrow, and yeah. If there is a fire, you got to be really careful. A lot of opportunity for that to spread quickly. While I was there, just happened to coincide with the 822nd anniversary of the city. So really, really old city. They had this big festival, which you're seeing here, and they had a lot of music going on, which was also really interesting. That these songs that they were playing, I had no idea. I'd never heard them before, but everybody around us, they knew them really well, and they were just singing and dancing along, and it just kind of seemed like it was more than just like Latvian folk songs. It was also just kind of like Latvian rock and roll that I think that's just popular in Latvia with Latvian artists, and they loved it. They were going crazy. But yeah, so that was really interesting as well. So that's evening on the Delgava River, and here's the skyline, St. Peter's. This is the one Roman Catholic church in the city. It's the cathedral there, and I think this is it's an Episcopal or Anglican church. But yeah, really, really neat skyline where it's not skyscrapers; it's still steeples that rule over the skyline. Well, yeah, actually, no, yeah, it is pretty clean. When we were going on the boat tour, we saw that a little farther down from the city, there's a beach and people are swimming in the river. So yeah, it is actually pretty clean water, and people actually swim in it and stuff. And I saw people fishing as well. So yeah, it's a lot less dirty than some of our American rivers at big cities. So yeah, pretty clean water. And this is the end. This is just Pax and I. So we made it. We got all the way through. But any questions on what you saw or anything that I talked about? Yeah, it's just over 1 million. Just over 1 million in the city. And guess how many people live in Latvia altogether? It's like 1.8 million. So it's kind of a one city country. Most everybody lives in Riga. Well, yeah. So liturgy, I could kind of figure out where we were because it's very very similar, if not exactly the same. So yeah, could tell where we were at in the liturgy. It's just different language, so I couldn't understand what we were saying, but I knew what we were doing and where we were at. The sermon I'll admit, the sermon was the hardest thing to sit through because it was kind of early in the morning, still dealing with being jet lagged and just traveling and stuff, and it was long, and I didn't understand a lick, so I was like, well, I'm getting pretty sleepy, but yeah. You could still kind of tell where you're at in the service because our liturgy is so similar. So just Riga and then Jurmala. Jurmala was like a 40-minute train ride outside of the city, but Jurmala is very much a tourist town. A lot of people go to vacation there and to get away, and in Jurmala there's a big Russian presence. So a lot of the people that live there are Russian. I think they actually call it Little Russia, is what some people refer to it as. But yeah, just Jurmala and Riga was what I was able to see. Oh yeah, just yeah, It's everything's much smaller, and you're much close together over in Europe, just in general.
What do they have for to earn their money?
Uh, yeah. So I mean, I know that they were big manufacturers with the Industrial Revolution. I don't know if that still is kind of the main thing that they produce today. Yeah, I'm not sure on what their biggest export would be currently. But just kind of really common to here in America. You have your fast food, and they had Burger King over there, and had a lot of shops and restaurants all over the place. So, and a lot of malls as well. This is kind of one of the things that after they were done with Soviet occupation, and they kind of had their taste of capitalism, they really liked malls. and they built a ton of malls everywhere. So they're kind of like, so many decades back than like America is today. They're kind of living in the 90s in a way that malls are really popular, and they really love going to them, and they built a ton of them. They're all over the place. And with driving, yeah, I'm glad that I never had to drive over there. They are on the right side of the road, but traffic in the city anyway is just crazy. You got people driving all over the place. So the tram was really convenient. They have pretty good public transportation there, and the way that where the Bobby's house was located, really good location where the tram is just like a block away. You can just get on one line, and that'll take you into the heart of the city, and you don't even have to connect to a bus or a different line. Just really good location, very, very convenient. So that was cool as well to get around. But anyway, we're over time, so let's close in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as Thanks for listening, and if you ever have any other questions or want to know more, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to chat with you and talk with you. So thanks.